Thank you for joining us tonight, Riverside Baptist Church, Kinley, North Carolina, on a Sunday night. We appreciate you joining us. Appreciate our folks being here tonight. Is a Super Bowl night, and again, if you'll stay with us for a few minutes, we'll get you out by the end of the game. Uh, I'm sure with that. Uh, some years ago, we were at church on Sunday night, and it was a big thing. We built it up a little bit, and one thing led to another. But anyway, Charlotte said this: said, "I want to get home before halftime. I want to see. I don't care about the game, but I want to see the halftime show." And we went home, and that was the year they had the wardrobe malfunction, I think it was, and that was the end of us watching the halftime shows with that. It was something that went on, and it's a big event. I won't take away from that. Of course, it's in Las Vegas, from what I've told. Never been there, and so I don't have any plans on going with that. All right, Matthew chapter 13 tonight. I'm going to begin reading in verse 24. I'll read down through verse 30. I'll pause and talk with just a few moments about this particular message. But I do want to say this, and that is the message tonight comes from Talks to Farmers. This is the book that I talked about. It's one that Christy found, and actually it's two books that go together. And so this book is from that. It deals with farming, and I've just I don't know. I connect with that half for a long time all my life, I think, with that. And so, but anyway, tonight we're going to be dealing with a very familiar topic for those that are connected with anything to do with farming. Matthew chapter 13, verse 24. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. And I want to pause right there. There is no farmer that intentionally takes bad seed and plants in his field. You just don't do that. And so, that's not an uncommon thing here to take good seed and sow in the field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. I want to say this again. Farming is a community thing, but you have enemies in farming. You do. And farmers, they won't work together, but yet they will work together. It's hard to explain what goes on with that. It's a cutthroat environment, if you will, when it comes to some aspects of farming. But anyway, it's very clear what's going on. Picking up in verse 26. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Tonight we're going to focus on that, but gather the wheat into my barn. Now you understand what's happening, but what does it mean? Of course, it's a farming thing. Wheat is a crop that is raised locally. This time of year, if you look out and see a field that's green, more likely it has some type of a wheat, or some of it's a cover crop, but a lot of it's still wheat. But wheat is planted for the grain that comes off of it. Now, when the wheat is harvested, it's usually June, July, in that range, and then that wheat is sold, and it's used for feed. Wheat has two purposes. A lot of wheat that we raise here is used for animal feed. Some wheat makes the grade, and it's used for flour. Not a lot of what's produced here is used that way, but some is with that. And in the recent years, there have been those that have come out being celiac disease or intolerant to those things that have wheat in it with that. But wheat was grown back in the day in biblical times, and it was a story that's being told where the people understood it. You see, I could talk about farming to some group, and they wouldn't have any clue what wheat is or anything about that. Um, but then you could talk to another group and they would understand it. But the Lord talks to people in a manner that they understand. Now, parable is a earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Now we could wonder what's all this about. It's obvious to understand the wheat being good, the tares being the weeds, if you will. It's understandable the good seed. It's understandable a harvest. Those things about it. But we have many ideas as to what it could be. But it's interesting to me that this simple parable is explained in detail. You don't have to wonder what's the meaning of it all. Skip down to verse 37. Verse 37. Here is the parable that we just read explained. He answered and said unto them, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be in the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels. They shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Again, it is explained. Then, verse 43, then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. So, the parable explained the sower is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed is the children of God. The tares are the children of the devil. The enemy is the devil. Don't get all bent out of shape when somebody talks about the devil being an enemy, because the Bible identifies the devil as the enemy. And he is a real enemy. Dave Kistler preached a message, and it said, you cannot defeat the enemy if you can't define the enemy. Now, he was not talking directly about the devil himself. But in the United States, we will never defeat the enemy if you can't define the enemy. The greatest threat, the greatest problem that you have is not an external enemy, it's one that's internal. Amen? So you can apply these things with the United States, but if you can't define it, the enemy, you'll never defeat the enemy. The enemy doesn't walk in with a sign that says, I'm the enemy. The devil doesn't walk up and say, I'm the devil with that. I know you heard the joke about the devil showed up at church one day. It was a little early. The devil came in and sat down. The man was standing at the back, and he looked, and he said, who's that here? The man said, that's the devil. He said, that ain't a problem. He went down and sat right beside of him. The devil looked at him and said, do you know who I am? The man said, I do. He said, well, then, aren't you scared of me? The man said, I'm not scared of you. He said, well, why aren't you scared? Why are you not scared of me? The man looked at him and said, I've been married to your sister for 35 years. Folks, I'm here to tell you the devil is someone that I'm scared of. When I say I'm scared of, I want him to stay away from me. You know, I talk about a snake. I have a fear of snakes. And I remind you, a scared man will hurt you. And that's just Satan is real, and there are folks in this world that don't understand and say Satan is not even real. Satan is real. Satan is anti-God. He's on the opposite side of that. Satan, the devil, is the enemy. Very clear in Scripture right here. The enemy that sowed them the seed is the devil. And then it goes on to say, the harvest. That's the end of the world. Now that harvest, don't let it confuse you right here. That harvest is not the rapture. It's the end of the world as we know it in that sense. And so you continue on. The harvest being the end of the world. By the way, one of the reasons that I'm standing here tonight is because of I call it a film, but it was a CD, DVD, whatever at the time. It was The Harvest. That was the title of it. And the first time I watched it, I sat there and cried just like a baby. And I watched it multiple times. And I said, Lord, are you sure? Are you sure? But I knew from watching that God had called me to pastor a church. That was one thing. But there are other things. But that was one right there that just really stood out to me. With that, the harvest. It's the end of the world. The reapers are the angels. The reapers are the angels. You say, why is that? Well, that's what the Bible tells us very clearly. It goes on to say, well, this one's kind of added from me. The fire is hell. Okay? The fire is hell. But then the barn is heaven. The barn's heaven. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about 4 words tonight, and I'm going to be done. I will not be very long. Number 1, go back to verse 30, the end of it. It says, but gather the wheat into my barn. The 4 words: separation, congregation, designation, and destination. The 4 words. Number 1, the separation, but. In other words, there's a distinction between the wheat and the tares. Modern day farming is this. You plant grain, you plant wheat, and at some point about this time of year, you start applying some type of nitrogen or something to turn it green. You see some fields now that are starting to turn green. It's not only the temperatures that are turning it green, but it's the growth in the wheat itself. But in that wheat that's planted that looks green, there are weeds that are growing already right now. And so what usually happens is farmer sprays some type of chemical on it to kill the weeds that are growing in there. So it's just the grain, the wheat, that's growing. They put nitrogen on it, mix it all together, and spray it with that. But there's a separation. In other words, a field that's full of weeds is not something that's beneficial. Now, a field full of weeds is productive, but it's not necessarily beneficial, not to the extent of what you're trying to accomplish. It's producing more bad seed. You follow me? And it's in our world today the same way, and that is you have the good and you have the bad. Now, it's not good and bad in my life where the good outweighs the bad. It's the battle that takes place. And I will say this, that it seems like the bad seed are reproducing more than the good seed. It's just like it's taken over. And if you're not careful, you would say, well, the good seed would be crowded out. It would be overshadowed. All the growth would go to the bad, and the good would fall away. Well, we have the Word of God that says the good's going to be here in the end. So that's what we hold to with that. But the separation that takes place. And it says, it goes on, it says, but gather. Gather. That's the congregation, the coming together. You do understand that my grandfather farmed, he farmed entirely different than I did. Entirely different. When it came time to harvest, to gather the wheat, he would go out and cut it and rake it over. My grandfather did that. He did not own a machine that would do it. Others in the community did. He never planted a lot. It was all for his use. Most of the wheat that he raised, he used to feed the chickens. He had a yard full of chickens. And I remember that very clearly growing up. It bothered me to no end because every time you walked outside, you had to watch where you walked. The chicken. I said, shut those chickens up. He said, no, I got them. I want them all out. Free range chickens. And he'd feed it. But it was just entirely different. I remember when I started farming, I had a conversation with my grandfather sitting under a tree in a little reglider swing back and forth. And I said, Granddad, I think I'm going to go buy a combine. He said, what are you going to do that for? I said, well, I think that's the thing for me to do is to go buy a combine. He said, where are you going to get it at? I said, I don't know. He said, you going to get it to think you can pick corn and wheat and beans? I said, yeah, that's my plan. He said, you know anything about it? And I said, I don't. He said, well, you go buy one. A man down the road right here, he'll come help you. He said, I'd go talk to him. So anyway, I went down there and talked to that man, and he told me what kind to get. And then I went looking. Now, this was before internet and all this stuff. You got to understand, this has been a long time ago. I found one between Smithfield and right out of Smithfield and Goldsboro, kind of is a good way to put it. I went down there, and the man said, yep, this is what I got. I said, that's what I want. He said, well, wait a minute. He said, I'm going to make you a deal. I said, what do you mean? He said, I've got two of them. And he said, and I have a 2-ton truck. He said, I'm through. He said, I'm going to sell both combines and the 2-ton truck. And that's what you need. I said, I don't want but one combine. He said, you don't understand a combine, do you? I said, never, don't know one thing about it. He said, well, I've got one sitting right over here that's just like this one, except this one is for parts. I said, I don't want that one. He said, this combine for parts will make you more money than that one running. I said, maybe I don't want a combine. Anyway, I got them, brought to the house, truck and everything. I went up there and got the man that was going to show me how to run that particular combine. It came time. We got it in the field, and I got in it, cranked it up, and he said, here's what operates this, you know, and showed me. And so I drove it around the field one time. And he showed me exactly what to do. And he said, you got it. He said, now here's what I want you to do. He said, I want you to get turned around here and get back in here. He said, and I want you to run it just as fast as you can drive it. He said, you're going to learn something about this. He said, drive it just as fast as you can drive it. And so I did. I was going right along, and all of a sudden, everything in there started, it sounded like it was coming all apart. He said, stop. He said, do you hear that? I said, yeah. I said, something ain't right. He said, you got it. He said, you have choked it up. I said, what do I do now? He said, all right, here, I'm going to show you. And so he stood off, and I raised the header up on it, and he said, you go under there and open this trap door and knock it out. Well, when I opened up that door, now I was cutting wheat, it fell out. I didn't wear glasses at that time. And I'm here to tell you, I changed colors from right here up. All you can see is the white of my eyes. The nastiest stuff you ever seen. He said, now pull all that stuff out. And every time you reach up there, it'd come all in your face and everything else. He said, I'm gone. He got in the truck and left. I said, why do you tell me to do that? He said, now you know what not to do. You know what not to do. And if it happens, you know how to get it undone. But a combine is an amazing thing. It can be the best thing in the world, equipment-wise, to run. or it can be the most aggravatingest thing you've ever seen. It has adjustments on it. It has it like just like thrashing the wheat. It pulls it in and it separates it, and the bad goes one way, and the good goes one way, and it gathers the good up in the bin. Man, it's a pretty amazing thing how it can. And folks, it doesn't identify it from taking a picture and saying this is good and that's bad. It identifies it because of the size of the seed. I had a field one time that was wrapped up with weeds. It was bad, and it was a bad weed. It was hard to control. And my grandfather said, "Ken, I figured out how you can do yourself a favor right here." I said, "What's that?" He said, "You take your combine." Had a little bitty seed in that grain, in the weed. It was horrible. He said, "You take your combine and get it down there and tape up everything in it. Don't let nothing come out of it. Good, bad." He said, "You just tape it up and just shut it up tight." He said, "And you run around that field and you get all them bad seeds. And then you go down there and dump them out and burn them." I said, "Granddaddy," I said, "if I don't let nothing come out of the combine and I run all that up in there," I said, "it's going to get so stopped up we won't never get it unstopped." He said, "I got an answer for that too." He said, "Light the match." A combine's known for burning up because of the dust. But it does the separation. Not only does it separate, but it gathers, it keeps the good. It keeps the good. Now, there's different kinds of combines. All right, tell me, see if you can name a type of, a maker of a combine. International Harvester, red. I had one of those. A John Deere. All right, International, McCormick goes together. All right, John Deere. See if you can name another one. No, I don't know if Kubota makes a combine. New Holland did, and they've merged since then. But that was a yellow machine. Now, you name probably three of them. Can you name another one? I have a combine. It's not a John Deere. Oh no, I do not want a Massey Ferguson. They did make them, huh? Farmall. That goes with the International. I did not say Gleaner. That's the kind I have, a Gleaner. Do you know why I have a Gleaner combine? Gleaner is cleaner. Why do you think? It is the best for me. It's the easiest to work on. And not only that, but there's a man right out of Oxford that has parts. And if you have a combine, you're going to need parts for it. Okay? And the man told me this. He said, "There are three things in life I never want again." He said, "I don't want nothing I got to feed. I don't want anything that I got to paint. And I don't want a combine." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Well, the combine is real simple." He said, "Everything on it moves. Everywhere it moves, it won't wear out with that." But that combine, the invention of that combine came about. If you look at the history on it, and if Brother Scotty was here, Brother Scotty rode in a combine that you held a bag, and it dumped the good grain of what you were trying to harvest in that bag. When that bag was full, you tied it up and set it off. But could you imagine riding on a combine, holding a bag and letting it dump in it? You know, that was not clean with that. The cab on a combine comes in handy. But they hadn't always had that. And even prior to the combine, you had a manual way of doing it. That sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it? Gathering the good. Gathering the good. Continue on. Not only do you have the but aspect as separation, the gather aspect of congregation, but you have the designation, the wheat. The wheat. How many kernels of wheat or grains of wheat do you think you get out of one kernel when you plant it? 100. That'd be a real good wheat crop. But it's one stalk that comes up, one blade that comes up, and then it forms a head. And that's what you take. You could go out when the wheat's mature and getting a little dry. You can go out and take the head, break it off, put it in your hand, rub it like this, blow, and all the chaff goes away, and the wheat kernels, grains are left. Then you can count them. How many of those little grains of wheat do you think are in a bushel? It's a whole lot, isn't it? Wouldn't you hate to have the job of counting? So they don't do it by number, they do it by weight. A bushel of wheat weighs a certain amount. Anybody here happen to know how much a bushel of wheat weighs? 56, I believe. 1 million wheat kernels. 60 pounds, 1 million wheat kernels. Could you imagine that? But the quality of wheat depends on the test weight. In other words, they project what a bushel would be and figure the weight off of a sample, and your test weight has to be within margin. Also, the moisture has to be right with that. But wheat, distinguished. The good seed produced wheat. Now, in the story, man went out and planted wheat. Enemy went out and planted tares, weeds. And when they come up, the servant said, hey, we got a problem. He said, yeah. Well, you want us to go out and pull up the bad weeds? Farmer said, no, because when you pull up the bad weeds, you're going to disturb the good. You're not going to produce anything. But did you know it would be almost impossible to distinguish between the wheat and the tares at a certain size growth? You can't identify it until later with that. Chemicals today can identify it because of the properties within the plant. But that one aspect of it, the wheat is different. It's distinguished. It's the good seed. In other words, in the world today, you have the bad seed, you have the good seed, you have the weeds, you have the wheat. The wheat is what you want. The wheat is what's the benefit. The wheat. The wheat. You ever thought about this? Why does God relate to the Christian as wheat? Wheat. We know Christian is the light, but it's identified in this parable as the wheat. Something for benefit. Has a purpose. The designation. Then the distinction, or the destination. The destination. It says, but gather the wheat into my barn. My barn. That's where it's headed for, into the barn. I mentioned in what I started out, the barn is heaven. Gather the wheat into my barn. How many of you know what wheat is stored in? Anybody? When you run the combine over a wheat field, you put it in a truck, you haul it somewhere, what do you think it's put in? A grain bin. Grain bin. And that grain bin, you keep air running on it to keep it dried out. You have to do a lot of things to protect the wheat once it goes into the barn. But the barn represents safety for the wheat. You want to know why? There's no more elements in the field. Wheat, when it grows, it usually gets up yay tall. Only the top portion, it's about that much, is the head in it. That's where the wheat is, just the top portion. Combine goes in, cuts it off, it falls in, separates it out, kicks the bad out the back, The wheat goes in the combine, you haul the wheat to the barn. It's real small. It's like grass seed, a little bit bigger. Put it in the barn. But did you know that that wheat in the field, that stalk that holds it up, the wheat can get so heavy that it'll fall over and the stalk will break. That's why it's such a timing issue. The wind can blow it down. The moisture, the rain can damage it. Wheat that gets moldy is some nasty mess. Nasty stuff. But the barn represents safety. I'm glad God's got a barn for me. I'm glad that barn's already been built, prepared, a place for me. And there's a purpose in it all. Now, I'm not going to like going through that combine to get graded out, separated out. And God's grading scale is real simple. He doesn't do us by size. He does us by what's genuine in our heart. The wheat or the weeds. By the way, the Bible says you're either lost or saved. You're either wheat or weeds. Wheat or weeds. Thank you for joining us at Riverside Baptist Church, Kinley, North Carolina. Tonight, as we conclude our service with an invitation song, if you did not like the message tonight, Christy is going to be the complaint department tonight. Christy and Jeff are going to handle that with that. But that's a farming lesson